Hey everybody, it's Caitlin. Welcome back to CoronaChat. Today is Tuesday, May 19th, and over the last 2 days you've probably seen something about a company called Moderna, which has released some promising preliminary data on a new vaccine candidate. So what did they find and how big of a deal is this? Let's start at the beginning. So Moderna is a company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts that works on vaccines for a number of different illnesses, including certain strains of influenza, the Zika virus, and this new coronavirus. Moderna's new vaccine candidate for the novel coronavirus is called mRNA 1273. And when a new drug or vaccine is being developed, it has to go through lots of different types of tests to make sure that it's both safe and effective. And at a very high level, the process for developing a new vaccine is something like this. Researchers start by doing very basic research on the virus itself, right? They want to understand what it looks like and specifically what proteins it has on its surface and what are kind of the different components of the virus that help it to work. And what we tend to be looking for is a protein that the virus has on its surface, but that none of our cells have on their surface. And if we can find something that's unique to the virus, then we can teach our immune system to look for that specific thing. And the trick here is to find something that the virus has, but that our cells do not have, right? Because we want to train this to use, this protein to train the immune system to attack. And if we train the immune system to recognize and attack a protein that our cells have too, then we can cause an autoimmune response where our immune system attacks our own cells, right? And so once researchers find these unique viral proteins, they start to work with animal models to see if they can get the animal's immune system to recognize the viral proteins and produce antibodies. They then expose animals that have these antibodies to the virus to see if the antibodies protect them from getting sick. And then if these animal challenges are successful, they move on to human clinical trials. And human clinical trials are designated as either phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. And phase 1 and phase 2 trials are designed just to test if the vaccine is safe in healthy people. So this is, again, to make sure that the vaccine, doesn't kill anybody, that it doesn't cause paralysis, that it doesn't cause any kind of serious adverse effect. We're not at the point in phase 1 and phase 2 trials testing to see if the vaccine will actually protect you from getting sick. Right? So phase 1 trials are typically very, very small. They just have a small number of participants. And this is because we don't want to expose lots of people to an experimental drug or vaccine if we don't know that it's safe. Remember, we first have to do no harm. So if the phase 1 trial goes well, then the vaccine moves into phase 2, where it's tested in a larger group of people to make sure that it's still safe. Right? And this is because, some adverse reactions might be rare, and so we need to test a large group of people to be able to see if anybody develops that adverse reaction. And during this trial, researchers continue to monitor, again, otherwise healthy participants. We're not looking at anyone who's sick, just healthy people, to make sure that no one develops any kind of adverse reaction to the vaccine or becomes sick. And if anyone develops a serious reaction, the trial is stopped and the vaccine candidate does not move forward. But if everything goes well, the vaccine candidate moves into phase 3, where it's given to many, many people to find out if it actually works to prevent the disease. And typically for a phase 3 trial, many people are vaccinated in a population where the disease is actively infecting lots of people. And then we just follow everyone to see if anyone gets sick. And it can take a while for us to have a clear answer to this question because we have to wait for people who were vaccinated to be exposed to know whether the vaccine works. And if everyone is, staying home and social distancing, the vaccinated people might not ever get exposed. So we wouldn't know if the vaccine works. And although in animal trials we would, vaccinate the animals and then expose the vaccinated animals to the virus to see if any get sick, we don't typically do this in humans because it wouldn't be ethical. Remember, first do no harm, right? We can't give people a disease to see if they'll get sick or not. Because we're living in unprecedented times and so many people are getting sick and dying from the virus, from coronavirus, right? Bioethicists are starting to weigh, what are the ethics of letting all of these people die because we're not, actively trialing and testing this vaccine candidate, not actively infecting people, versus what our obligation is to not deliberately infect people who are volunteering, right? So there's some discussion about whether we might need a different approach among bioethicists right now. And so really specifically, those discussions that are underway right now are centering on whether we might ask healthy volunteers to raise their hand to be vaccinated and then exposed to the coronavirus to figure out if the vaccine works faster. But that decision has not been made yet, right? That's still an ongoing active discussion. Okay, so back to Moderna and mRNA 1273. So Moderna has been working with the NIH to develop and run really rigorous clinical trials. And they're working together to make sure that everything's done correctly, but also to work faster. And this is, again, to make sure that you've got kind of the NIH, which is kind of the flagship institution for clinical research in the United States, working with Moderna to make sure that everything is done correctly, that it's high quality, right? This is not something where we're like, oh no, is there conflict of interest because a company and the NIH are working together, right? This is really about the NIH being involved to make sure that everything is done correctly. So right now, together, they're administering a phase 1 clinical trial that's seeking to enroll 105 people, right? And these are, again, healthy people who have volunteered to be injected with this vaccine candidate, even though we don't know if it's safe, right? These people are really going out on a limb and taking a chance to try to help advance science. These healthy volunteers are then split up by age group. So there's an age group for people aged 18 to 55, a group for people aged 56 to 70, and a group for people aged 71 and above, right? And then the people in each age group are further subdivided into 3 different treatment groups, right? So one treatment group will get an injection of 25 micrograms of the vaccine candidate. One group will get 100 micrograms, and one group will get 250 micrograms. And again, there's kind of those 3 treatment arms in the 18 to 55 group, in the 56 to 70 group, and in the 71 plus group. So we've got 9 kind of treatment groups of 15 people each in this whole trial of 105 people, right? And the reason we're testing all these different amounts is because we want the final vaccine to include the smallest amount necessary to generate a full immune response, right? This helps to avoid negative side effects, right, if we give too much of something. And it also means that we can vaccinate more people with the same amount of vaccine if it turns out to be effective, right? So like I said, there's a total of 15 people in each group, and they get 2 injections of this vaccine candidate, right? 1 injection on day 21 and 1 injection on day 29. But to make extra sure that the vaccine candidate is safe, right, they didn't just inject all 105 people in the same day. They started with 8 people in the 18 to 55 age group, and 4 of them got the 25 microgram injection, and the next 4 got the 100 microgram injection. And the data for these first 8 participants was reviewed before anybody else got a second injection to help minimize the risk if the vaccine ended up being safe. So these 8 people, kind of were ahead of everybody else, and if anything bad happened to them, they would stop the whole trial, nobody else would get the 2 injections, right? So even after the data came back from those 8 people saying that everything was okay, they didn't just, inject everybody who was left on the same day, right? Additional volunteers were added every few days. So the day count is from when each participant got their first injection, right? So like day 1 for the first person is not the same as day 1 for the 5th person, right? They maybe started on different days, but we're tracking each one of them, their progression over time, right? So this means that as we're starting to get preliminary results back, we only have them from some participants. We don't yet have the data for all 105 people who participated, right? So there's a few different sets of data that Moderna and the NIH have released so far. Again, these are kind of preliminary results. This isn't even the full set of data for phase 1, but this is what we have so far. So of the first 45 people in the trial, and all of these people are in that 18 to 55 age group, right? Every single one of those 45 people developed antibodies to the virus by day 15 after their first injection. So even before they got the second injection, their bodies had already started producing antibodies to help fight off a coronavirus infection. And by day 43, at this point, they've had both injections, right? All 15 people in the 25 microgram group had as many antibodies as people who had recovered from actually being sick with COVID-19, right? And the 10 people in the 100 microgram group who'd gotten to day 43 that we now have the data for, right? They had even more antibodies than people who had actually been sick. We don't yet have data for anybody else, but so far this is very promising because it suggests like, okay, well, the people who are getting injected with this vaccine, even pretty small amounts of it, are generating as much of an immune response as somebody who's been, sick and in the hospital for weeks. And so far, none of the participants in this trial have gotten seriously sick. One person in the 100 microgram group developed some redness in the injection site, right? It's in the shoulder, that went away. And 3 people who got the 250 microgram version, this is the highest dose of the vaccine, developed a fever and some muscle pain and headache, but all of this got better by itself after a few days. Still, since it seems like these lower doses, right, the 25 microgram, the 100 microgram versions are effective and don't make people sick, Moderna is only going to use the lower doses in future trials. The other kind of data we have from this kind of preliminary set of data that's been released is from that first mini group of the first 8 patients enrolled in the trial. Remember I said that there were kind of these first 8 people that got everything before everybody else to make sure it was safe before everybody else started getting all the injections, right? So researchers took some blood samples from these first 8 people and separated out the antibodies and gave those antibodies to mice. Right? And then they exposed those mice to coronavirus to see if the antibodies protected them, right? These human antibodies. And even though we might think like, well, human antibodies in mice, like how well does this work? As it turned out, none of the mice got sick, which suggests that this vaccine candidate might be effective in addition to being safe. Now, of course, mouse models are not the same as human beings. We still need a lot more data from people, but this is promising. This is the kind of data that we would hope to see for a successful vaccine candidate. So if the data from the rest of the 105 patients look this good, mRNA 1273 will move into phase 2, where 600 healthy volunteers will be given the vaccine to continue testing whether it's safe. And Moderna has indicated that they're revising the protocol for phase 2 to get rid of the 250 microgram option, since that seemed to be making a couple people sick, and they're going to add a 50 microgram option to see if we can also get the really robust immune response that we got from the 100 microgram option, but with a smaller dose of vaccine. So we'll keep following this to see what happens. If phase 2 goes well, right, those 600 people are all fine, nobody develops any adverse reactions, then Moderna will move into phase 3, where they actually start to try to test if this vaccine is effective. And if all goes well, they're expecting to start the phase 3 trial in July, which is right around the corner. So normally this process, this clinical testing process takes many, many, many months. But Moderna and the NIH are working together really closely to try to do this faster than we would normally, because we have an active pandemic on. So as we hear more about mRNA 1273 and other vaccine candidates, we will be sure to keep you updated here on CoronaChat. In the meantime, stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll see you back tomorrow night.